Good morning. I am Renee with Redesign by Renee Co. And this morning I am going to be doing a resin tutorial. And I was trying to do that live, but for some reason all three of my internet options are not working and will not let me go live. So I'm going to do a video instead, and I'm going to upload it to my site as soon as I am done so that you can watch the resin pour tutorial. Let's first go over, and the first thing I do is I close my garage door because I work in my garage. I close down my garage door, try to keep it closed. You want to have the most minimal dust in the area that you're going to pour resin, because resin is going to attract dust and you don't want to have a bunch of dust particles inside your resin, and it will ruin your resin. So you want to have as dust-free as possible environment, and you want to have your surface completely cleaned. You're going to need gloves, and you're going to need 4 buckets. I'm not sure if you can see this. I move it over a little bit. So you're going to want to have 4 buckets. And the reason you're going to have 4 buckets is because your smaller buckets you're going to use to measure out the A and B part of your resin. Then you're going to dump them one at a time into the first bucket, and you're going to stir it for 2 minutes. And then when you finish with that, you're going to pour everything from bucket 1 into bucket 2, and then you're going to stir it for another 2 minutes. And we'll go over all of that, but that's why you want to have 4 buckets available. And I like to get these. I get these at Ace Hardware, and they actually have the measurements on the side, so it's really easy to keep track of how much you're pouring into each one, because you have to have equal parts in order for this to set up properly. It's very important. You also need a stir stick, and you'll need a foam brush or some other type of brush to go around the edges. And I also have a squeegee. I try to avoid touching my resin at all costs, so I use a little bit extra. Seems resin is self-leveling, but I try to use extra resin so that I don't have to touch it, because it is self-leveling, but when you touch it, you can put divots in there that you do not want. You want your resin to, when it dries, to be completely flat without any, it wants to look like glass. And my son just pulled in, and we'll see if he remembered not to open the garage door. We're about to find out. So, what I use resin, epoxy resin from Pro Marine, and I buy this online. I think this was $60 or $70, but it makes a full gallon between the two. It makes a full gallon of resin, and it'll go a very long way. You can buy it in smaller quantities through Hobby Lobby or some of those other places if you just want to do little things. But this is what I use. So I'm going to start with 16 ounces of each. So I want 16 ounces, and I'm not going to mix this on my table. I'm going to move over here. You want 16 ounces of part A and 16 ounces of part B. And I'm going to set this down so that I can actually get a good eye. And I learned how to do these resin pours from my mentor, Leah Noel. She taught us every step of the way on how to do this. So this is part B that I just poured in there, 16 ounces. So now I'm going to pour part A, 16 ounces. And part A is going to seem a little bit thicker. You're going to want to have a way to set a timer, because you're going to need to time out 2 minutes for each time that you're going to stir. You're going to need to time it out for 2 minutes each time. So I'm going to start with my first bucket, and I'm actually going to pour in. I learned to do this. You pour part B in first and then part A in. Not sure the science behind it, but I trust the professionals. So first I'm going to pour in my part A. Try to get all of it out of there. And you could probably use a 16-ounce cup too if you wanted. And then I'm going to pour in, I poured in part B first, and now I'm going to pour in part A. You will see air bubbles in here, and that's okay, because we will get those out here in a little bit. Seems that's a little thicker, it's taking a little bit longer to pour all the way out. And now I need to get my timer going. And I'm starting my timer for 2 minutes, and we're going to stir this for 2 minutes. You do not want to stir this like you're scrambling eggs. You want to stir it smoothly and make sure it's completely incorporated, but you don't want to scramble it, because when you scramble it, you make a lot more air bubbles, and a lot of the times some of those air bubbles will stay and be harder to get out in the last step of your resin, where you have to use your heat gun. So you don't want to whip it. I wouldn't whip it. I would just do a good stir to get it all incorporated, all the way through the middle, all the way around the edges. I'm sweating. So you want to keep stirring until the timer goes off. And when the timer goes off, we are going to pour this into the second bucket and stir it for another 2 minutes. So just stir, stir, stir. Just give it a good stirring, get it incorporated. And like I said, you will have some air bubbles. That's not a big deal, but you don't want to create like you're fluffing some egg whites or something. You don't want to do it like that. And when I pour this into the second bucket, I'm not going to pour it on top of this table, because I really don't want to get any on this table. I do not know how healthcare workers wear gloves all day and masks. I really have compassion for them, because my hands are just sweating already. I have a lot of compassion for people that have to wear gloves and masks all day. Oop, there's my first timer. Okay, so now I'm just going to move this off of the table, and all I'm going to do is pour this straight into my second bucket. Pour all of it straight into that second bucket. So the smaller buckets that you have, that you just put part A and part B into, you can reuse those, but these other buckets are usually not reusable, because stuff will harden inside them. So now I'm just going to start the second 2 minutes, and I'm just going to stir it again. So you really want to get it incorporated. I don't know if you can see. I have some air bubbles, but I don't have like a ridiculous amount of air bubbles in there, because I'm not scrambling it. I'm just really stirring it to get it incorporated. And do you know how I know not to scramble it? Because I've scrambled it before. And I had so many air bubbles that I had to do a second pour on top of it to correct the error of having so many bubbles. And I even used my heat gun, I did everything else right. But I realized when I did a video of it, and I was watching it back, and then I realized in my video, I was just scrambling away. And then I was like, I bet you that is the reason that I had so many air bubbles that I was fighting. Because you will have air bubbles, but you don't want it to be just one big container of bubbles. And then I realized my error and corrected it in the next pour, and the next pour I did was 100 times better, because I didn't scramble the eggs. Timer's almost up. So this week I was able to get out more, and it was so nice to talk to people and see people and just interact with people. I didn't realize how much I missed that. It was definitely a good week last week. I love my people, but I need to see other people. Almost there. And let's see if you can see all this. Let me just here a little bit. This side so you can see a little bit better. That surely feels like it has to have been 2 minutes. And our 2 minutes is up. So now, I'm going to set this off to the side. And resin is messy, so you want to have something underneath it. As you can see, I have this old piece of laminate flooring or vinyl flooring, and so this is that marble, faux marble that we did in our video last week. And so now you're just going to pour it on. And I'm going to leave a little bit because I have that other small piece that I did. So I'm going to leave some of this resin in here for that. So from the time you start working with it, I really just want to get it all the way around. You have about 30 minutes from the time that you start working with it. And I'm manipulating this piece because I want to get all the way around the edges before it starts to fall off, like I did with the paint pour. And it's going to start to drip. So normally, if I was doing a piece that I would keep the bottom, I would tape it off and plastic wrap it off, and I would use the to completely protect the bottom. But since I'm getting rid of the bottom of this, it does not matter. So it's really starting to pour off the sides, and I want to make sure I get all of it covered. So I'm going to keep tipping it. And as you get there, you'll see where the bubbles are. You got to make sure to try to stay over top of your plastic though, or whatever floor surface you have there. I try to let the product do it, whatever it wants to do naturally, rather than try to manipulate it with a tool. I'll only bring the tool in when absolutely necessary, because this product wants to naturally flow. And then when I set it upright again, it will level itself back out. So that side I need to add a little bit more to. So I don't have to keep manipulating it. And you can just hear it pouring off. So you do want to keep your piece level. Once you get it fully covered, you want to keep it as completely level so that it will have the full opportunity to self-level. You want to make sure that you have it completely level so that you don't have high peaks or anything else there. So my sides are covered very well. I'm just going to go around the edges because they drip, and you don't want to have the drips down there. This is where the foam brush comes in, and you're going to want to do this in about 15-minute increments. From as it starts to dry, you're going to want to come back and do this a few times to get those drips off. You can sand them off after you're all done, but that just kind of makes a lot more work. So I try to get them, you know, in their stages of drying about every 15 minutes or so. For and I'm going to change gloves because I need to use my heat gun. Let me get my heat gun. So the heat gun is what I use to get rid of all of those air bubbles that are still in there. And you don't want to go hard on the surface. You kind of want to glide it over the surface to get those air bubbles out. And you'll actually see them start to pop as the heat gun touches it. It's kind of cool. You can actually watch them, and if you get just in the right light, which is usually lower, you can actually watch those little air bubbles pop. And you'll see how it starts to look more glassy. It's kind of cool. When I did my first one, you may not be able to hear me, but when I did my first, I saw a lot of air bubbles, and I thought once it dried, most of those would go away, and they don't. That's why you need to try to get as many out as possible. If they're real faint, you won't see them, but if they're bigger air bubbles, they will show up. When you're done, they will show up. As bright as they did when you were doing it. So the key to this is to get yourself just the right angle where you can see them, because if you're standing over top of them, a lot of times you can't see them. So you need to get at the right angle where you can really see them. Without stepping in the resin. Right here, it's not covered. So, and this is when you get this close too, you're also going to start to see areas that maybe had just a little spot missing. Those will start to show up. That's another reason I always leave extra resin in there. But you really have to look at it from all angles to see any areas that you may have missed with the air bubbles. It's looking pretty good. I have to say, I love the top of this table. And I'm going to put some hairpin legs on it and really give it a whole new look. The base is not in good condition, and the base is not in really good condition, and it's extremely wobbly, and there's no way to really tighten it because everything is, so I could have spent a whole lot of time repairing it and trying to get it to not be. You can see here how wobbly it is. It's extremely wobbly. So I'm just going to repurpose the entire piece and do something different. And you see a couple air bubbles. Just to get it to look, this is probably my favorite part of doing the resin, is sitting here and doing this and watching all those little air bubbles pop. It's probably the smoke. Watching all those little air bubbles pop, because it's instant and you get to see really cool how it goes from like little bumps to so the little bumps go away. Really cool. So now what I'm going to do is just go around the whole entire piece and see if I see any areas that I can see any air bubbles. And I see a couple on the side over here, but everything else is looking really good. So I'm gonna hit up this side right here where I had just added a little bit extra and get rid of those air bubbles. And this is looking really good. I'm gonna see if I can bring you in a little bit closer so that you can see what I'm seeing. I don't know if you can actually see this. Can you see how glassy it looks? It's probably not a very good angle. Let's bring her down. I don't know if you can kind of see, but I will post photos when it's completely done. As you can see, it's still dripping. So for the next hour, sorry about that. So for the next hour, I'm gonna come out here every 15 minutes and I'm going to run my foam brusher on the base and get the drips as they're drying. And this will set up in about 8 hours. So for those 8 hours, if you're doing it in a space like I am, like your garage, you're gonna have to keep your garage door closed, have very minimal dust exposure. And if you do it inside, I would do it in like a very well ventilated area because, you know, resin has a strong odor. Probably not the safest. Should probably be wearing a mask, but this will finish and it will have a completely glass look on top of it. And it will look like it's got a marble look to the top, and it's one of my favorite things to do. So I hope that this tutorial was helpful. And I'm gonna stop the video now. I'm gonna pour on top of that little piece. And if you have any questions, please feel free to post. I was gonna say if you're catching the replay, hit hashtag replay, but you're gonna all watch it on the replay. Seems I could not go live, and I do apologize for that. I do not know what my internet is doing, why. And I do see a couple more air bubbles coming up. Not sure why, so I'm gonna hit those. So this is why you really gotta keep an eye on resin. Because even after you think you get them all out, some more will surface. The more it starts to level, more may surface. So this is why when I do a resin pour, I need to do it at a